King's prose. Picking a wet nurse. Last winter I had another baby, and as usual I had no milk and had to hire a wet nurse. It's not easy to find a wet nurse in Shanghai. You can call her from the recommended store, not to mention the boss. You have to be careful about whether she has gonorrhea or syphilis if you want to send them to the hospital for a test. One thing is for fear that the person involved will not want to do it. 9 out of 10 women will be unwilling to take off their pants to be a wet nurse. Just a milk test and a blood test will also cause them to have seizures. I'm afraid secondly, the procedure is too troublesome, and the doctor's manner is unbearable. Thirdly, I am a bit suspicious, and the fact that he left a report from a doctor of medicine cannot make me feel relieved. And there is another, the most important reason, that the fee is too high. One test costs at least 10 yuan, and one test is not right and another is wrong. How can ordinary people like us afford it? I had no choice but to take the baby to Ningbo. The city of Ningbo has really changed. Zhongbayanandi Street, which were the busiest areas in the past, have now become dead streets. The merchant opens the door every morning, and the clerks are all lazy, standing at the counter and looking at the sky. When the air raid siren goes off, they have to close the store door quickly, and when the all-clear signal is pulled, they have to open the door again. Although they also know very well that no customers will come to the door at this time, but if they don't do this, they were immediately intervened by the police. There were many policemen with sticks. At the roadside intersections, there were small groups of people on the road, and most of the people coming and going were strong men on patrol. They were busy opening and closing doors like this 3, 4, or 7 or 8 times a day. And sometimes they might not even see the shadow of an airplane. My home is in the west of Yuhu Lake, which is considered a residential area. On normal days, whenever the sun sets, there are always some male and female students riding free bikes or riding horseshoes, slowly circling the ring road. There is a wide area in the lake with green shadows, pavilions, and rocks. It is one of the scenic spots in Siming. It is called Chuzhou, which is the site of the county girls' middle school. I spent the best 3 years there. It suffered a lot during the recent 8th bombing of Ningbo. It was still intact last winter, but the houses were empty and the students had already gone to the countryside. I stayed at home for 2 days, but there was nowhere to buy side dishes, and there was no way to find a wet nurse, so I had no choice but to listen to Zheng's mother and go to Zhongkan, Xixiang to pick them up. Zhongkan is a large village, and most of the residents are named Zheng. There are many mountains and few fields there, so men cannot make a living by farming. In winter, they go to the mountains to collect firewood. In spring, summer, and autumn, they have nothing to do, so they can cook at home and take care of their children, while the women go to the city to make money. Those who have milk be a wet nurse, and if you don't have milk. I loved my child and wanted to find a good nanny for her. So with Zheng's mother's consent, I traveled all the way to the countryside to seek help in person. The child needed to be fed and could not leave her body, so she had to take it with her. Zheng Ma brought a basket, a small mesh basket, and a few cans, some of which were gifts for Zheng Ma's family, but the main ones were bibs and diapers. Originally, if we wanted to go to Zhongkan, we could first take a long-distance bus from the South Gate along Yinfeng Road to Yinjiang Bridge, and then hire a rickshaw from Yinjiang Bridge to Zhongkan, which would take less than half a day. But after the war, the road had already been demolished. We had no choice but to take a boat, which lasted most of the day. The scenery along the way was very good, but we had to put up a canopy to protect the children from the wind, as if they were trapped in a coffin. The hull of the boat was extremely small. Sitting on the floor inside, her legs were so numb that Zheng's mother would go ashore to relieve herself from time to time. I heard the boat was rumbling, and I was afraid of delaying the trip, so I teased Zheng Ma about whether or not I could catch a ride. Zhongkan is really poor these days. Ma Zheng sighed. There is no farmland in this town. After the war, the price of rice became more expensive. Everyone couldn't afford to eat, so they had to make some taro, sweet potatoes, and satisfy their hunger. We lost money last year. There were so many people fleeing that the people in the village vacated their houses and lent them to others, and they used extra straw to live in the toilet room. Then the weather is cold now. Wouldn't it freeze to death living in a makeshift hut like this? It doesn't matter for the adults. How will the children live? Jung's mother sighed again. Speaking of children, the boys in Zhongkun still raise hungry and lean ones. At most, one of the girls will be kept, and the rest will either drown to death or be sent to the hall. If any family raises a daughter, don't even think about asking others to borrow rice, because they will definitely refuse. You have the ability to raise your daughter. Who should be the unlucky one to help you? I have nothing to say. I feel that the child sleeping in my arms is still lucky. If she had managed to break out of Jung's mother's belly now, I think she would have been thrown into the hall long ago. I have seen the nursery outside the south gate. Yes, if a wet nurse raises 5 or 6 children, even a cow will be worried about insufficient supply, so the prettier ones can still get a few mouthfuls of milk, while the yellow and thin babies have to drink after their throats are hoarse from crying. Live with some soy milk. When we arrived at Yinjiang Bridge, we looked at the time and it was already 2:30 in the afternoon. I was so hungry that I moored the boat by the bridge and asked the boatman to go up quickly and buy 3 bowls of yellow croaker noodles, 1 bowl for myself, 1 bowl for Zheng Ma, and 1 bowl for the boatman. The boatman thanked him again and again. And while eating, he kept telling us about the lively scene of Yinjiang Bridge. It was said that there were fewer people living in the city, and all the shops wanted to move here, but the people in the county refused. It was said that they were forced to continue to open in order to maintain the appearance of the city, so they had no choice but to keep their doors open in the city and moved most of their goods and saint or staff here. After eating and going ashore, the child cried violently again, so he hurriedly bought water to make milk powder in a restaurant, fed her milk powder and changed her diaper. We waited until 3:30 before asking for a rickshaw to go to Zhongkun. The fare was 1 yuan and 2, and the distance was for miles. 10 miles. The rickshaw dragged along the gravel road, neither fast nor slow, but quite comfortable. After passing one village after another, yellow dogs barked, and children fell asleep and woke up, and cried again when they woke up. There are often strong men doing evening exercises in the square. They are all villagers. They look weird and can't figure out their steps. From time to time during breaks, they pull open their pants to pee, which makes the instructors get angry and pick up whips to beat them. But they don't. He didn't avoid it. He just endured it silently. The front of Jung's mother's house faces the stream. It has a half-cut tile wall, and the gap is the entrance. There is no gate. It was almost 6 o'clock when we arrived, and her wife was still busy making snacks. I couldn't stop her again and again, so Zheng Ma went to wash diapers by the stream, and soon she brought a big bowl of fried rice cakes with vegetables. The bowl is made of blue flowers, thick and big, and the rice cake is cut very thickly. The vegetables were still hard, with too little oil and too much salt. I really couldn't eat them. An 8 or 9-year-old girl watched me swallow her saliva. I quickly pushed the bowl away and asked her to eat. She was about to take a step, but she hesitated. Zheng's mother's daughter-in-law scolded. "You little bitch. You stinky old lady. You are just greedy all day long. Do you have a share of grandma's snacks? Dinner is almost ready and you still want to talk." The girl who scolded did not dare to. He moved and looked at me and swallowed hard again. So I asked her if she was Zheng's granddaughter, and the daughter-in-law responded, "My own daughter has already been adopted as a daughter-in-law by someone else. This bitch was fostered in my house, and she ate 2 or 3 bowls at a meal. Her mother only pays 3 yuan a month for food. She has not brought any money for more than 3 months, and she has not even a piece of shoe cloth. She is making a lot of money outside and is happy." I looked down at the girl's feet and the toes of her shoes. When he opened his mouth, he stepped down and dragged the heel of his shoe, which was only half the size of his foot, and there were no socks on his feet. During dinner, everyone in the village gathered around me. While washing diapers, Zheng's mother had already announced the news that I was going to be a wet nurse, so they all wanted to get this fat job. "My wife has had her baby for just 5 days, said an old woman with a pouty mouth. "There is so much milk that she can't bear to wear a shirt. She sleeps naked in the quilt, and the cotton is soaked with boron and becomes hard. She squeezes out 3 big bowls a day. She also said that her breasts are so swollen that they hurt her to death. If your grandma is happy, these big babies will not be able to finish even one breast, and the rest can be squeezed out for your grandma to drink and nourish, but my nanny needs to be hired urgently. Once she's chosen, she'll be taken to the city. Your wife is still in confinement, so how can you leave with me right away?" The old woman was really anxious and moved her withered lips. "What kind of confinement are there for us poor women? Why don't they cook and do laundry after 3 days of being raised? She is quite lucky to have me as an old lady. If you are alive and have a stomachache, someone will hand you soup and boil water. If you live in a country without a mother-in-law, instead of taking in the bloody child, you have to light a fire and make soup yourself. If your grandma wants it, you can follow her today. Go, take the child with you and throw it in the hole." "My grandma doesn't like babies under 1 month old," a woman in her 30s holding a baby interjected. "I've had it for almost 2 months. The head of the household wanted to throw the baby away during the confinement period, but I didn't want to throw it away because of that. There was no one at the moment, so I decided to keep her for the time being, so as not to lose her milk if she did need it." A few days ago, the head of the house said that Mrs. Zhang from the former village was going to be a wet nurse and would bring her newborn son to our place for foster care. So she took care of my daughter. "Go and put it in the hall. It only costs 2 or 3 yuan a month to raise one, and I have to eat my own food. It's not as good as being a wet nurse. If your grandma pays me 6 yuan a month, I can take care of her tonight. Let the baby sleep, leave the little thing alone overnight, and ask his father to take him to the hall in the morning." This is coming from a mother. I am surprised. After eating a bowl of rice, the children cried again. I put down the rice bowl and asked them for water to make milk powder. They didn't have a hot water bottle, so they had to light a fire to boil water, which I didn't expect. So many women rushed to offer milk to my child, and I had to accept their kindness. So Zheng Ma decided to eat its sister-in-law Gensheng. Sister-in-law Gensheng was a woman in her 30s, with a bun and a fair face. Her baby is just 3 months old, and her milk bag hangs right up to her navel. She is a little scared of people seeing her. The most surprising thing is that when I asked her how old she was only 21 years old. I never expected that such a young person would have such a mature face and appearance. Later I learned that the people in the village were like this. They ate food that was not nutritious and worked hard, not to mention dressing up, so they looked old. That night I slept in the room of Zheng's mother-in-law, and sister-in-law Gensheng also called me over to make a bed with Zheng's mother in the room, so that if the child quarreled in the middle of the night, the child could be carried over to nurse. I know that sister-in-law Gensheng's heart is full of hope, and she will have many sweet dreams that night about working as a wet nurse for a wealthy family in the city. This room is the only highlight of Zheng's mother's house, ever since her parents-in-law's generation. They had to choose this room when building a new house because of its tidy floors. The old couple had slept here together for more than 30 years and 8 years. When her former wife came, she moved the old one to the back room. Facing the outside of the room is a large wooden bed, which can sleep for people. Unfortunately, the brown shed has become a little wider with age, and sleeping on it makes the bones hurt due to the horizontal beams. The pillow was square and full of grease. When I lowered my head and made a sound, it was filled with straw, an old cloth with blue background and white flowers, and for quilts. It's big enough, but it's very hard, and the fabric is thick. I'm worried that it might scratch my child's tender face. I didn't sleep well all night. My body is cold and my heart is upset. I know that most of the women here don't have gonorrhea or syphilis, and they don't make any excuses. I can give them 7 or 8 yuan a month, and they will be happy. But how can I make people abandon their children for my children? The next day, they persuaded me to leave the child with Sister Gensheng and go with them to various villages. I haven't been to the countryside for 10 years, since my uncle was kidnapped, so I'm not interested in seeing the water and mountains again this time. So we started with this village. The mulberry branches were covered with diapers, chicken droppings were everywhere, and most of the children were sallow and thin, and their clothes were ragged. There were a few fairer ones here and there, and when asked, they were all city dwellers who had recently escaped from the city. Zheng's mother's daughter-in-law told me that since people from the city fled here, things here have become more expensive. They are used to eating fish and meat, buying baskets at every market, and using a lot of oil. In the past, a kidney in the countryside cost 14 copper coins, but now it costs only a dime. Eggs have also increased from 4 copper coins to 6 or 7 copper coins. so people in the village couldn't eat meat, and they couldn't bear to eat their own eggs, so they all gathered together to sell them to them. They only used vegetables for meals every day. If they used sweet potatoes for meals, they didn't even have to eat the vegetables. Speaking of vegetables, they have become more expensive recently. People in the city like to stew vegetables in oil. Once a pound of vegetables is burnt, only one bowl is left, and sugar and soy sauce are added. How much does it cost? My family eats taro twice a day, with no side dishes, just chopsticks dipped in salt. City people are not used to lamps, so they light up mobile lamps brightly at night. Then the glass cover bursts and they buy a new one. The owner of the damn sundry store makes money. Children in the city eat snacks, which makes us country kids' eyes itch. When the noise gets louder, we give him a big slap while listening to her. We walk slowly and unknowingly reach Changli. Jungma has a girl living here, so she insisted on inviting us in to sit and relax. Jung's sister's house has no walls. There are 4 houses in a row on the uneven stone steps. Each house has a thin board door. Once you enter the door, you will find a room with a mud floor. There is a stove inside, and under the front window, a cool bed was placed. There was a table in front of the bed, and next to the table was a chicken coop. On the right side of the chicken coop, there was a child sleeping in a cradle. There is also a ladder placed at the entrance. There is no building here, so the ladder is probably used to go up to the attic. When the distinguished guests arrived, they asked me to sit on the edge of the bed while they were busy boiling water. Winter is the time to collect firewood, and they sell the cut and dried wood. The remaining firewood is damp and messy, and some of the leaves are still green. My eyes were filled with tears, and I could no longer open my eyes. When we looked back at the child in the cradle, he is fast asleep and motionless. We admire the human instinct to adapt to the environment. After shopping for 3 days, the wet nurse still couldn't choose. They all spoke ill of each other like enemies. The eldest mother-in-law said that sister-in-law Xiang had lice, and the sister-in-law Xiang said that the eldest mother-in-law's niece had her period 4 times a month, which made me hesitate. Even Zheng's mother didn't know what to do. Sister-in-law Gensheng nursed the baby for me very carefully, which made me feel a little happy. Unexpectedly, on the 3rd day, she cried so hard because her baby had not been fed for half a day. Her mother-in-law picked her up and asked her if she had any milk to feed her. She got angry for some reason and slapped the 3-month-old child hard in front of me, which made me disgusted with her cruelty, so I felt cold again. In Zhongkun, I was deeply suspicious of the great maternal love. It turns out that the so-called virtue of Haoshan and Wuji was greatly reduced when economic problems occurred. I will never read the poems of Polygonum in the future. Early on the 4th day, I took the baby and left first, leaving the responsibility of choosing a wet nurse to Ma Zheng. I told her that in addition to being healthy and having abundant breast milk, there is another condition. The child is a girl. After she comes to my house to be a wet nurse, she should not be thrown into the hall, or she should be fostered nearby. The salary I will give her is 9 yuan a month.
Alright, this part of the story ends here.
Want to know what happened next? Let's listen to the breakdown next time.